Yeah, good morning, Shiva. Thank you. Yeah, is it audible to everyone? Can you confirm that, please, quickly? Yeah, in the chat window, type yes. If you are able to, if you are able to listen my words. Yeah, so Usha, yes. Raghava, good. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. So, just like, how was the weekend? Have you completed all the activities on the weekend? About the Linux? Have worked on the weekends? So on Thursday, you were mentioning about some pending activities. So to complete the pending activities, weekend required. Yes. So let's try to complete this point of view where I didn't take this on Friday. But finally, overall, how was this the activity? Have you completed all the activities? I don't see any response from anyone. What's happened? Okay. Anyway, let me conclude it. The before starting the shell scripting, the Linux important concepts as a DevOps engineer, which we should know. That's about files and folders. Yeah, the file structure and as well as the folders and how do you access the files or how to copy the files, how do you move the files, or how to delete a files, or how to view the file content using the VA editor or cat options, or how to create a file by using the touch or creating a directories. Yeah, these are all some important activities which we should know from the basic commands. And then system info related commands, some system information commands, yes, which we should know that. And that's about how do you know that the architecture of the system, or how do you know that memory information or CPU utilization, or how many users are currently logged in, current user information. Yeah, there are some commands on the system level, date and time, calendar. Then we are understanding about process management. Yeah, how to verify the process, how do we list the process, and processes in auxiliary format, and which process consume the high CPU or high memory utilization, that is using the top command or htop commands, and the overall CPU utilization, that is system level memory utilizations. Yeah, those options which we should know it, and as well as jobs, how to view that, how to view the list of all the jobs, or how do we run the job in the foreground, background. Yeah, those are all some activities on the process management. Then we are understanding package management. Yeah, how to manage that the packages, that is installing the packages or deleting the packages or updating the packages, or how do you set a list of all the packages, installed packages, or how do you view that the files which belong to the particular package, that is using RPM based or MPM based, or if it is the Debian based systems, understanding that apt-get or dpkg. So those things, like as a package management point of view. And then service management activities, that is how to start the service or how do we stop the services, or how do we check the status of the services, or how do we enable or disable the services. Yeah, systemctl is important utility which we're trying to understand over there. Then we had that networking related commands. That is a ping command or IP command or if config or IP config. And the remote systems connectivity point of view, SSH protocol, SCP protocol, and how to connect it to the system from the Windows system or from the Linux systems. So Windows to Linux, Linux to Linux, connectivity point of view or copying the files point of view. Yeah, SSH password based authentication, SSH passwordless based authentication. Yeah, those are all some important concepts which we should know on the networking side. And then we had that the users management activities, how to create a user or how to delete a user or how to update a user, how do we add the user to the group, that is a primary group or optional groups, how to change the password of the user, where all the users will be stored or passwords are stored, groups are stored, that is important files of that, yes, users management. And how do we add the users to the sudo file, sudo permissions. Yeah, another concept which we are understanding, file permissions also. The file permission, that is about chmod command. There's a read write execute permissions. How do you give it at user level, group level, or others level? And how do you change the owner of the file or folder? Yeah, there is a file permissions understanding and environment variable concepts, alias concepts, grep commands, that is setting the text or find commands. Yeah, so they're all important activities which we should know from the Linux concepts point of view. Are you clear all these concepts? In each and every interview, they ask you like, are you working this on the Linux operating system or Windows operating system? Which one are you comfortable with that? Yeah, if you say this Linux and they ask you like, yes, some commands on this Linux operating system. But all these activities, which we should know that. But it is not required extreme administration level. And as well as if you have this at user level, that is not sufficient. Yes, user with some management activities, process management, package management, service management, network management, users management, files management, searching the files, finding the files, or setting that environment variables, aliases. Yeah, these are all the important concepts which are required as a DevOps engineer on the Linux operating system. Is it clear about these points? Or how many of you done these activities? Quickly confirm that, say yes or no, or in progress. If you have completed, yes. If you didn't do anything, then no. Or if you are in the process of this, say this like in progress. Yeah, Shiva, you are in progress. Raghava in progress. Sushma in progress. Usha in progress. Okay, I thought it you would be completing by yesterday. Fine. So try to complete it as much as you can do, as early as you can do. Yeah, so let's move into this next concept. Okay, now we know that command using that, I mean, yeah, Linux level using the command line based How do you work it, or how do you perform all these activities? But if the manager is asking that, our client is asking us, suppose let's take it in the users management. Yeah, one member has joined to the project. One developer has joined to the project, or some operation engineer has joined to the project. Now you need to create one user for that new user who has joined, one username and a password in at least, okay, let's talk it like some 50 servers which you need to give the permission to him. That means in the 50 servers, you need to create that user and you need to set the password and you need to, yes, define the that user's related properties and share that username and passwords to the user. So you need to create in the almost 50 systems. Then how do you do that? Normally user creation, what is that activity? User add command, and with the username we need to define it with the property, some other properties. A user add command we need to use it, and with username and where the user home directory and which type of the shell, as we are understanding, is it a login shell required or is it a system shell is required? Yeah, obviously this user login is going to log into the system is nothing but bin bash shell. We need to define it. Type of the shell is bin bash shell. So what is the argument that is available? -s bin bash, the type of the shell. Or if you have the comments, adding the comments of that user. Or if you'd like to create a home directory, yes, -am. Or if you have the any specific directory location, -d. Yeah, with all these properties, yes, you need to create that user account. And using the password command, you need to set the password to the user. So this activity, user creation activity. So how many systems we have? So in the 50 systems, you need to perform it. So activity is the same. Activity is the same. That is creating user, executing these two commands. User add command, password command. Or maybe some other commands which are required, whatever it is. So all the commands after identifying that, these list of all the commands, we need to run it in the 50 systems. Then how do you do that? Suppose if you're going to do this activity, so each system login that, okay, first to take the server one, log in it, and create a user and set the password and do some other activities which are required and log off and log into the server 2 and do that activity, then log off and continue like this up to 50 systems. Just take it each system on an average, it is taking the 5 minutes. On an average, 5 minutes of the time it is taking is nothing but what is the total time that is required, estimated time to complete that activity? 250 minutes of that. The time 250 minutes is nothing but almost that is about how many hours? 4 hours. Above that it is what? Yeah, 4 hours of the time that is required. More than 4 hours. Maybe by mistake, whenever you are doing this activity, by mistake some wrong commands you have executed, then yes, we are the human beings, right? So same activity, log into the system and running these commands and log off it, and then log into the second system and run the commands and log off it like that. 50 systems continuously working, definitely we'll get it frustrated in one of the system and we do the mistake, or the human errors are going to happen if you're doing that manually. But if you do that any mistake, the mistake to fix it, it takes more time than normal. So executing the command, and if it is successful, okay, that is very fast. But if you do some mistake, identify that mistake, is it required password level that a problem, or is it required the user level problem, then removing that user and recreating that. So that is additional time or additional effort is required. analysis and all that. Getting the points of this? Maybe it is required the 5 hours or more than 5 hours. So simple one user to create it in the number of servers, that's the 50 servers. One resource that is required the 4 to 5 hours of the time. The client has to pay for it, right? Client is asking to create a user was, so he's a member joining to the project and gives the permission on all these servers. That is a client request. So client is requested, definitely that is hours based billing. A 4 hour or 5 hours billing, okay, definitely we'll get the benefit. But client is saying this was just creating that user. You are going to take it just like a 5 hours of the time. Is there any other solution? Yes, what is the solution? What we can do that? Figure the solution to complete it in the less than that time. What is the time that we can have it is? Suppose what is the solution that we can have it is? Suppose, okay, you are saying that the 50 servers. So okay, all these 50 servers have been set up and these are all running that. So like that, you have the 50 servers of the system. But now you got it today creating that user one activity. Okay, today you have done. Okay, 4 hours, 5 hours you have taken and you have completed. But tomorrow another activity you need to perform it. That means some update all the systems. These 50 servers you need to update it. Again, are you going to take it that the 5 hours or the 6 hours of the time? Or maybe tomorrow another activity. So this is not one day activity. Working with all these systems, this is not one time activity. This is a continuous activity. Then what we can do this is, or what is the solution we can have it? We can take it one central system, centralized system. So the centralized system, as we were understanding in the previous section, how to configure SSH. Yes, from the centralized systems, we need to have that SSH communication to all the systems. SSH. So one time if you have configured that SSH communication to all these systems, so that is one time enough, right? Then that activity that is suppose updating the systems or package installing the packages or updating the packages or creating a users or deleting the users or setting the passwords of the users or some runtime statistics I need to get it. Suppose so in each and every system we need to keep on checking about it. What is the disk space that we have it on the system? Disk space. Our particular service is it running it or not? Suppose HTTP service is it running it or not? We need to check it. In case that service is down, we need to send to that user saying that so and so service is down or so and so system disk is reached that 80%. There is a disk capacity monitoring or CPU monitoring or memory monitoring or perform the configuration changes, that is users creation or updating the packages or installing the packages or patches updation. So this is not one day activity, right? All these systems management, that is continuous activity, either configuration management activities or monitoring activities. Monitoring activities, what are those? Disk checking. That is how much current disk is the free available. If the used one is reached 80% or 90% or 70%, then we need to get the alert notification. Yeah, disk checking or memory checking, as we're talking about it in the top command. CPU utilization, memory utilization. If it is reached as 80% or 90% on the basis of the metrics, the current environment, then we need to get the alert notifications. And the network bandwidth, network IO operations or disk IO operations. PM start command is available to know that all these details. So these are all some monitoring activities on the system level. There are some important metrics which we need to keep on analyzing from the system. So these are all monitoring, or we can say operational. But configuration management, activities is also important. What are the configuration management activities? Creating users, that is managing users, managing the networks, managing the packages, managing the services, managing the file system. The managing in the sense either creating or deleting or updating. So these activities also which we should know that. So if you are having this, the servers in the environment is nothing but yes, those servers related these kind of activities, we see that continuously, either configuring that activities or monitoring activities. They're all the continuous activities. Then how do you do that? If you're going to do the manually, that takes a lot of effort and sometimes yes, human errors. A lot of effort is required and a lot of time is required. So what are the solution that we can have? It is we can take this one centralized system. In this centralized system, we can implement automation scripts. Yeah, whether it is required that is checking or memory checking or whatever that activity you have. So you need to identify that activity and you need to write the script for it. Script writing is one-time activity. Or getting that the particular script, yes, as per the requirement, that is preparing that the script one-time activity. But once the script is ready, if it is already configured that all the SSH systems, if you run the script from the centralized system connecting to all these 50 servers, then within that minutes the work will be done, right? And if the next time any changes, we will modify the script and we'll reapply that. So within the minutes that activity will be done, not required hours of the time. And we don't see this any errors also. That means whatever the script you have implemented here, the script here it is working is nothing but in all the systems it has to work it. So it is going to update the same configuration. Maybe you'll be having the connection issues. But if these are all the same distributions and same versions, then we don't see any issues. So are you getting the points of that?
ఆ రోజు 95లో ఉన్నటువంటి ఈనాడు పత్రిక కథనాల్లో ఏమేమి రాశారనేటువంటి చూస్తే మనం ఆశ్చర్యపోతాం. ఎన్టీ రామారావు.
Hi Venki, could you please?
Someone is watching that TV as well as. Okay, cool. So the big concept here. Yeah, so this by implementing this script, Maybe that is required some effort while implementation time. But one time, if you have the script in your hand, whether you have the 50 servers or the 100 servers or the 200 servers, doesn't matter it. One time execute it, and you need to just have this, make sure that SH configurations one time. Already you are observing that how to configure SH. Yes, if I'm having the public and private key, public key copy to all the systems. Passwordless configuration. Yeah, key has to be generated here. Public key copy to all these remote systems and have the passwordless SSH communication one time and create this script which is required to apply that either monitoring related or configuration management related and apply the script either on the base of the interval if you need it. Yes, define the cron jobs here and run that through the cron job based, or if you like to apply the changes, configuration changes, yes, apply the scripts from the centralized system to all the servers which you have in the infra, then you can easily manage that the infrastructure instead of going to that each system, logging to the system and doing or executing the commands manually and verifying the manually. Instead of doing that, if you have the script, whether you have the 50 servers or the 100 servers, in the minutes you can complete it. So that is the beauty of that, the automation. Is it clear about these points?
Yes, sir.
But today we are talking about it, the shell importance, but in the next, the DevOps solution point of view, we'll come back to that. Configuration management, especially, we have the separate solution from the DevOps, that is Ansible. We'll come back to that Ansible. But today, as a Linux activities, we understand so far, Linux related activities, if you would like to complete it. So what is it like automation solution we have from the Linux is, that is shell scripting. Or if it is the Windows-based operating systems, how do you perform that Windows-based operating systems like automation activities? That is a PowerShell. If it is the Windows-based operating systems, how do you automate it? Windows administration activities is PowerShell is available, but most of that activities, which we should know at least from about our side, that is a shell scripting. Yes, we are going to deal with the shell scripting. Yes, if you're learning the shell scripting is nothing but what is the main agenda is. Yes, this is automation solution for the Linux-based operating systems to manage that runtime statistics to collect it and checking the conditions and sending the email notifications point of view, and as well as to apply the configuration changes on the remote systems. Yeah, so but what is the shell and shell scripting and how this shell scripting is going to helping that? Yes, we go for this one by one, understanding the concepts of the shell scripting. Is it clear about this? Please quickly use the chart window and type that. Yes, clear. Ajay, Ravi, Sushma, Usha, Raghava, Avani. Good, thank you. Yeah, now let me talk about it. So what is the shell and shell scripting and how do we use it, the shell scripting? Not only the shell scripting, before talking about the shell scripting, we will talk about the general programming, some methodologies or some mechanisms. So if you are going to learn any programming language, whether it is a shell scripting or Python scripting, or next we are going to talk about it, YAML language, JSON language, Terraform language, but any programming language if you are learning is nothing but some basic concepts that is required. But what are the programming related basic concepts? We'll try to understand the first, then we will move to that, especially on the shell scripting, the first section. Yeah, the programming basics concepts. How many of you are from programming background? At least C, C++, you know the concepts. How many of you know the programming? IJ, okay, you know it. Ravi Shankar, okay, basics. Fine, yeah. I mean, even if you don't have it also, no issues. Yeah, Busha, okay, good. Sushma, okay, good. Yeah, but anyway, so don't worry about it. Even if you don't know anything about the programming also, but change the mindset. So what the mindset that's required is, so far which background you are in, that doesn't matter that. But whenever we are discussing the concepts, how you are trying to understanding and analyzing the concepts are the very, very important. Analyzation is, oh, good, Venki. You can write the programs, good. So analytical skills are the very, very important. If you have this one problem, that problem related solution to provide it, the how you are analyzing the problem and problem related solution, how you are bringing that is important. If you have that tactic or that mechanism, you are good. But yes, so any program, if you're talking about it, important some concepts which we should know that. So what are those important concepts is? Suppose let's take this one example. So I'll talk at all these programming concepts with an example. Then it is very easy. Suppose let's take that calculator program. The calculator program. So this is the problem I have given to you, was implement the calculator program. And I have given the functionality. What is the functionality? What are the functionalities are available in the calculator? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, the basic calculator. Yeah, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Yes, there are the four different operations. Yeah, there are like a functionalities, we'll say that, right? Functionality of that program. Yeah, implement it and give me the solution about the calculator. That means user, whenever he enters about that, the required arguments with the operation, that is add operation or subtraction or multiplication, then he has to get the result of it. If you have this problem, then how do you start about the solution for it? So what is the first point identifying this from this problem?
What we need to do.
Okay, what we need to do.
What is given and what we need to do.
Okay. So what are the things that we need to do?
We need to perform some arithmetic operations, something like addition, subtraction, division.
Yeah. First, identifying that operations, or we can say that functions, right? Operations or functions, we say that. So if you have this particular activity, that activity related operations we need to identify. What are the operations? Add, subtraction, multiplication. Sorry. And finally division. So there are the different operations. First you need to identify that. So any program you are implementing is nothing but is what are the operations that is we are expecting that. Operations are the very, very important. Okay, now it has been identified. There are the four operations which are required for the calculator program. But each operation, yes, okay, now we have identified operations. What next?
Number of operands required to do the operation.
Exactly. But and we need to take request first of all for the input.
Yeah. So next we can say that to complete that operation, what are the inputs required? Yes, in terminology we can say that yes, as the programming approach, operands which are required to perform the operation. But instead of saying that word, simple inputs. Once you perform that add operation, what are the inputs that is required? Some A value, B value are the inputs, right? A and B
Yep.
are the inputs. Yeah, identifying that operation related inputs. In the programming terminology, what do we say that there are the variables, we'll call it, or arguments, we will call it, arguments which we need to pass it. Suppose if I'm using the calculator, this device, then I need to enter that A value and B value. There are the two arguments I need to pass it, or two variables I need to pass it. With operation, anyway, first we are talking to the add. Okay, add operation, if is entered, for add operation to perform it, inputs A and B are the inputs. But in the programming terminology, what do we say that? Variables. A is one variable or B is one variable. Or we can give that first number. You can give that about your choices. Okay, first number and second number. Or in general terminology, A value, B value. Or first number, second number. There are the two inputs. Okay, whenever we are identified that operation related inputs required. But some of the inputs are mandatory. Suppose whenever we are entering any forms of the fields, we see that asterisk mark. So what does that asterisk represents? Suppose you are filling some form in the internet.
Multiplication.
Mandatory fields. Mandatory fields.
Yeah, that is compulsory or mandatory, we can say. That means user must enter that value. But if you don't see that asterisk is nothing but optional. If you have that's a value, if you like to specify it, otherwise ignore it. So whenever we are passing that arguments to the program, we need to identify that inputs, and in that inputs, which are all the variables are the mandatory, which are all the variables are optional. Suppose whenever we are running the CP commands or any like Linux commands, we have so many arguments for it. But some of them are mandatory, but not required to use it all. Suppose if we just talk at the grep command, grep we are having grep, and then which string that do you want to search it, and a file name. But grep is having that -v, -n, -c. They're all like optional arguments, optional inputs for that grep function. So whenever we are designing that any problem statement, so what are the operation that is required? Yeah, first identify the operations. To complete that operation, inputs. Inputs in the programming terminology, we say that variables or arguments or attributes. Yeah, on the basis of the programming, we say this different keywords. Yes, variables we'll talk it. Yeah, most of the programming level we'll say that variables. Or whenever we are running the scripts, sometimes we say that pass the arguments. Pass the arguments are also nothing but input variables. Or in some of the markup language point of view, XML, AML, if you're going to use it, those markup languages, we say that attribute. Attribute is also the variables. Yeah, so first function related inputs, identifying that input variables or arguments or the attributes. What next?
Perform the
Okay,
operations.
you have defined that inputs and you have performed that.
Operation, what we do.
Yes, next one is so that functionality has to be implemented, right? That is business logic. Logic, functionality. What exactly you need to do that has to be implemented. Okay, here the logic what we are expecting this is first number plus second number. So as a add operation point of view, the first number plus second number. So this operation as this add point of view is a business logic which is required. If it is a subtraction, first number minus second number. If it is a multiplication, first number into second number. If it is a division, first number divided by second number or second number divided by first number. What is that? So that functionality has to be implemented. That is, logic has to be implemented. But once logic has been completed, this output, I mean, we'll be having the software perform this logic final output, right?
Yep, of course.
So what is the third section which we have to see is third point whenever we are talking this the programs, outputs or return values. What do you want to return it to the user or to the program? So once this function has been completed or once this operation has been completed, what is that output that we are expecting? That output we can say as a return value. But here what is that output is? Here we can take this one temporary, one more variable, internal variable, output. And we can assign this first number plus second number to this output variable. And finally, we can return that output variable. Yeah, first initializing that the variable, but I mean, for initializing that the variables is nothing but you need to assign the values, right? You need to assign the value. Suppose first number equal to 10, second number equal to 20. What we can say here? This 10 is the value which has been assigned to this first number. 20 is the value which has been assigned to the second number. Assignment will say that. But if you don't define assignment, this one we can say just declare the variables. Declare. The variable has been just declared, but it is not assigned any value. But the default declaration, what you will be having the variable value 0. Right? 0, it is going to return that right output. Default values should be assigned. Assignment. Left side is a variable name and right side is value of the variable. Even you see this output. Left side is that variable name. And right side, it is going to have the value of that variable. That is the first number plus the second number. This assignment. The value of this operation will be assigned to this output variable. Is it clear about this? Are you following the points? Yes, Ajay, Sushma, Ravi. Yeah, Usha, Raghava, good. Yeah, Tejaswini, good. Yeah. So if you are understanding any program, doesn't matter that. So whether you are going to learn today shell scripting or tomorrow Python or next day another ML, doesn't matter that. So these are all the generic things. If you know it, then you can learn any programming language quickly. So some terminologies are the important. What are the terminologies we are trying to understand? Here, if you just observe that, yes, if you are writing that the program first it has to be identified functions or operations. What are the operations I need to perform it? And once operation has been identified, that operation to complete it, what are the main inputs that we need to take it from the user? Or maybe we need to take the user, or maybe we need to read it from the file, or maybe we need to initialize it within the program itself sometimes with the default values. Yeah, the first identifying that's all the inputs. Inputs we can say that's in the different cases, different terminologies, variables if you talk it, or whenever we hear about the arguments, or whenever we talk about attributes, just think it these are all like as a which contains some variable name and a value which has been assigned, which can be used with these variables during the business logic. Yeah, on the base of that, the operation of the function logic will be defined. And once logic has been completed or functionality has been completed, whether the user is expecting that the output or not, yes, some functions required to return that the outputs, but some functions not required to return any outputs. But if we just talk it that add, yes. So whenever we perform this in the calculator device, entering that first number and second number with the operand, that is a plus. So we are expecting that output of the result. Yes, output has to be returned back to the user as a response. So there are the two inputs as a request we have taken from the user, and this is the response we are giving that to the user. Request and response model. Yeah, like this, if you apply to that's all these functions, let me just quickly go through this. Yeah, subtraction, we are doing that. Yeah, inputs, first number, second number, business logic, first number minus second number, and return that output. And if you are doing the multiplication, the same, almost the same. Yeah, inputs here also, that's the first number and second number. Business logic is first number into second number, and finally output written that the multiplication of those two numbers. And division is here also this first number and second number as a inputs, and first number divided by that's the second number, then return that output of that this result. Yeah, if we just convert this one into the programming model, all these, this is the like we can say English statements format we have defined. So first, the before going to implement any programming, first understand the problem and write in your own English statements. Take the pen and paper, any problem statement whenever they have given that, take the pen and paper and write it. What exactly the thing that is required to perform it. Don't think about the programming immediately. So how do you understand that problem statement? What are the inputs required? What is the business logic that is required? What is the outputs that is required? Returning the values. So first, if you have that clarity, then you can think it about it in the programming. That is the latest story. Programming wise, how do you convert these statements into the shell or Python? That is a later story. But first of all, if you don't understand this one, then you cannot write it shell or Python. Now you need to have the clarity on that. What is the thing that is required to perform it? If you have that's a clarity, then you can come back to the writing the scripts. Is it clear about this?
Sir.
Yeah, now if it is required to write into some programming language, how do you do that? Yeah, add is the function. So we define that like this format, the programming structure. Okay, variables. What are the variables that is required? First number and second number. So variables define it. But variables here, if you see this, if we define like this 0, 0, they're all hard coded, right? They're all, we say that hard coded. Value has been assigned here. That means next, if you perform in that any business logic, yeah, this is a business logic you performed and you have written that output. Then user, what he is going to get it always?
While getting the output, it is asking what is the which you find out first number, second number.
No. Suppose so if you define, if you execute this program always, if you like this, suppose user entered that add operation. Now, what is the output he is going to get it as a response? Always.
Will be 0.
Yes. Here, it has been hard coded the 0. So how many, suppose user has entered that, okay, 10 plus 20 has entered. But 10 is it going to assign to the first number? 20 is it going to assign to the second number? No, we have hard coded here, 0, 0. This is the hard coding, we'll say that. So always the user is going to get it the 0. Even if you enter the 10 plus 20 is also, he's going to get the 0. So what we need to do, we need to receive the arguments of the user. That is a first number, second number, whatever he is entering, that all the parameters we need to receive it. This one will say that parameters or arguments. Now whatever the a value he is entering, that a we will assign to this first number, and whatever the b he is entering, that b we will assign to this second number. Are you getting the points on this? So now what's going to happen, that if anyone is invoking the program add with the 10 comma 20, then 10 represents a value and 20 represents b value. What is the meaning of that? A equal to 10 and b equal to 20. That is the meaning. Then a, whatever the value we have, that will be assigned to the first number, and b, whatever the value we have, that will be assigned to the second number. Then output, what is that we will be having? That's we are going to get it 30. Are you clear about this point? Suppose if I write like this, add 5 comma 15, then what is the value it is going to have it? The output of this add function?
Obviously 20, I plus 15, I plus b like that.
Yeah, now that output we are going to return that. We are going to get it 20 here. Yeah, so this is assignment, we'll say that. Yes, one variable value we can assign to that another variable. So this is the dynamic way of defining that. Or if I define this 10 here and 20 here. Okay, whenever I'm running that, I'm going to get it. Addition value is 30. How many number of times if you run it? Number of times, that is a 30 only, right?
Yes, correct.
But next time, if I would like to pass it 5, 15, now I need to edit the program, and I need to change these variables. Then as I have assigned, I will be going to get it 20 now. But instead of doing that, we don't hard code it within the function. We don't hard code any values within the function. There are the basic programming skills. I'm not talking about any shell, or I'm not going to talk about any that's Java or the Python. These are all the standards. Understanding that the variables and variables initialization is very, 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 very important. How do you pass it the values? Values, yes, we can hard code it within the program, but is it recommended? No, it is not recommended. Then how do you do that? Instead of hard coding within the program, this is the program. Within the program, don't hard code it. It should not be changed anytime. So any program or function you are implementing is nothing but each and every time we should not go to here and we should not change it. So while calling or invoking that function or calling that function, what do you want that? Yes, I need it 100 plus 200. Then you will get that output. Take this output from the program and use that print that output or use that output wherever you need it. Now I am invoking the function by passing the a value and b value. A, now it is going to assign that a equal to 100, b equal to 200. So what is the meaning of this one here? A equal to 100 and b equal to 200. So a value I am going to assign to the first number, or b value I am going to assign to the second number. Now I am going to use it, the first number plus second number, then output. So return that output. Whatever that output it is returning by this function, I am going to assign that value to this variable. That is output, and I am going to print that output variable. Or instead of saying this output, let me give that result. Maybe output I have used over there. Yeah, so add is going to this result. I'm going to assign that result to this variable, and I'm going to print this variable. Like that number of times I can invoke this function, right? Suppose here 10, 20. Now I'll get it. 30 is the result. Here 300 is the result. So I'm not touching this any program. Program implementation only one time. But program invocation time, you need to pass the arguments. Arguments you are passing is nothing but, these are all we say that's arguments or parameters also. Parameters to this function. A is one parameter, B is another parameter. And these two parameters are the inputs to the program. And use that inputs, perform the business logic, and finally construct that output and return the output. Then catch that output. That means this add function, whatever it is returning. So that output assigned to this variable and use this variable within this another program. So final overall the point is, how do we define the function or operation? And whenever we are defining the function related variables identifying, that is inputs, but inputs don't hard code it within the program. So dynamically receive those arguments through the programming. But how do we dynamically receive those arguments through the program is pass the parameters or pass the arguments. Yes, this is the passing that parameter or arguments to this function. And whatever you are passing to this function, catch that. Take those parameters, values, and assign to that internal variables. First number, second number, this is the function level. Then perform the logic which is required. Then after performing that logic, what of that output we are getting about it, take this output and return back to the client. So who is going to call this function or who is going to use this function, and return the value of this function, that is the response given to the client. Then he will catch that output and he will use it printing point of view or maybe other function point of view. He can use it this result. So overall terminology is functions. Functions can be defined with the arguments or parameters. Arguments are the parameters, we can say that inputs, input variables to perform that function. Yes, take all these arguments and use these input variables to perform the business logic. And once the business logic completes, and define the outputs which are required to return it from that function, return that the outputs. So outputs, whenever we return it, who needs those outputs, they can catch that and they can use that. They can use it as nothing but they can print that result. Are you clear about these points?
Yes, sir.
Technologies first time, the little bit tricky to understand all these things. Parameters, arguments, variables, assignment, function invocation or function calling, returning the values of the function, and catching that function results. So if you get familiarity with these words, then we are good in the programming. Any program you are learning is nothing but there are the terminologies that is required. Assignment value of the variable, yes. Assigning that this value of the A variable to this another variable. This is assignment. Left side is a variable, right side variable, whatever the value we have, that value will be assigned to this variable. This is assignment. So what are the arguments you are receiving? That arguments you are assigning to the internal variables. Suppose if you like to implement for subtraction also, how do we do that? Simple, just take it this. Subtraction also is expecting two arguments, but function name is subtraction. Yeah, first number, second number. First number minus second number. That's all, remaining the same thing. But while invoking that, how do we invoke it? How do we invoke the function? Invoke or calling the function. Now I need to call that function, that is a sub. What are the name we have? Function name. The same function name I need to use it. And A value, B value. What I would like to pass it? I'd like to pass it a 20 here and a 10 here. Yes, once this function is invoked, yes, 20 and 10 will be passed here. And first number 20, second number 10. First number minus the second number, 20 minus 10, that is a 10. That will be assigned to that output, and this will be returned. Return is nothing but return back to the user. So this value will be assigned to this result variable. That is a 10 value will be assigned to this result variable. Then whenever we print it, then 10 will be printed to the terminal. So this one we say the function invocation. This one we can say the function definition, defining or implementing the function. So without defining, suppose if I call that multiplication, is it implemented the multiplication? It is not yet implemented, but you are calling that the multiplication, then what is going to give that? What is that? I mean, is it going to work at this line? Addition is going to execute it. Yes, this is available. Yeah, this is also available. Subtraction is also available. But whenever running this function, whenever it is going to call this one, is it going to executing this? Compiler will identify this multiplication function.
No, not at all. On this situation.
Yeah, so we haven't defined or we haven't implemented. So it is going to say throwing that undefined function, undefined function. It is not defined. So it is going to throw the error here. So it is invocation, invoking the function or calling the function. But if you like to call the function, first function has to be defined. Terminologies, try to get it that. Program you can learn at any time. But first, these are all the basic inputs. We're able to understand this. Then next, whenever we are talking that whether the shell or Python, it is very easy. Yeah, now this function has been defined. Now we can invoke it. This is definition, defined, implemented. Now we can call that function. Function name, and it is expecting two parameters, A and B value. Just pass it the A and B values. So what is that written output? 200 we are going to get it, right?
Yep.
As a print result. Suppose here, if I use it like this in this function, what's going to happen there? In this function, I have defined, we are receiving the parameters A comma B. Okay, A I have assigned to the first number, but B I didn't define it. C I have assigned to the second number. What is the value of the second number, or what is going to happen there?
The function parameters is wrong, the same. While we are hitting out.
Sorry, what's going to happen there? So what's going to happen to C? C is undefined variable, right? C, I mean, compiler, whenever it is trying to run executing this program, C is going to look in that, but C has been defined anywhere.
No.
It is not defined. Then it throws undefined variable.
Like compilation error. No,
Yes, compilation error. So before going to use a variable or function, it must be defined. It must be defined. That means I need to have at least here C equal to something 0. So this is the I have defined value as with the 0. I have defined the C variable. Fine. Now it is going to take the 0. Fine. No issues. But it must be defined. So variable you are using in the function is nothing but that variable either you need to receive it as an argument or parameter, or that variable must be defined within the program must be defined. This is the definition. Or you need to receive that as a variable or as an argument. Then you can use it that. Are you following the points, everyone? Very basic things. I'm not talking about it any shell. I'm not talking about it any Python. This is a generic concept. But if you know these concepts, then whenever you are learning the shell scripting, then it is easy. Or Python or YAML, whenever we say the variable contains a name and a value. Right side we say that value and the left side is the variable name. Right side value which will be assigned to this variable. Suppose here if we see that A value, what is that? We don't know it. But A we are receiving that as a parameter. Then what is that value? While invocation time we can invoke, we can understand it. Okay, so while invocation time A value is defined, first variable 20. First variable, what is that? A. That means A equal to 20. That means what is the meaning of that one here? A equal to 20. That is the meaning of that. B, how much you are passing? 10. Then what is the meaning of that here? B equal to 10. C we are not passing here. That means C by default is 0. Are you getting the points on this? The understanding all the parameters. So if you finally conclude about it, some important arguments, functions, important technologies whenever we are working with the programming. Functions with the parameters, A comma B, these are all the parameters, or arguments also we say that. Functions with the parameters are arguments. So what is a parameter or argument? Parameter is variable which contains a name and value. Example, A equal to 10 or B equal to 20. Name and value. Name is A, value is 10. B is the name of the variable or parameter or argument. Inside the programming, we say the variable. Inside this program, we say that variable. First number is a variable, second number is a variable, output is a variable. They're all the variables. But here A and B, what do we say that? They're all the parameters, we'll say that. A is a parameter, B is a parameter, or A is one argument to this multiplication function. B is one argument to the multiplication function. So parameter or argument contains name and value. Yeah, functions contains with the functions will be defined with the parameters or the arguments. And within the functions, we'll be having that within function, we'll say that the variables. Yeah, the variables are within the functions. So with the function, if you are defining them, those are always say that the parameters are the arguments. But within the function, whatever you are defining that, those are always say that variables. So here, first number or second number or output. These are all we can say the variables of the function. Yeah, functions with the parameters we can define it, or without parameters we can define it. And within the function we'll define the variables. But whenever we are defining the variables with the, here one more point. Static values. Static values. What are the static values? So for these variables, if we just talk it, we have assigned some static value, something equal to 10. What is the meaning of that? I have
Which
defined the
means
static.
which cannot be changed, sir. The
Yeah.
value cannot be changed.
Yes, the value cannot be changed. That means I'm hard coding that. So the first number equal to 10 and something second number equal to 20. I'm hard coding that. So this is not recommended approach. So what are the parameters we are receiving that? So we need to go for the dynamically applying the values to the variables. Dynamically assigning the values to the variables. Suppose here if you just take the first number or second number. So don't hard code like this. 10 and 20. 10 and 20 if you define it. Next time if you like to change it, you need to open the program. Once the program has been designed and implemented, you should not change the logic. You should not change the variable values each and every time. Logic, if it is required to change it, that is a different story. But variable values, we should not touch it. That means dynamical way we need to define. That means now we know that the concept of the parameters or the arguments. Yes, A value are passing or B value passing. Assign those parameters or arguments values to these internal variables. Yeah, variables within the functions, we'll say that. But within the functions, what are the variables you are defining that? Don't hard code the values directly. If you define it, they're all the static mechanism or hard coding. But instead of hard coding that, dynamically you need to assign the values to the variables in the functions. That means what are the parameters or arguments which are receiving that? Take it those parameters and assign that parameters to these internal variables of the functions. Is it clear about these points? Yeah, functions with the parameters or arguments. Parameters are also variables which contain the name and value. And within the functions also we use the variables. But there are like internal variables we can say. But variables we can directly assign the values. But you are directly assigning that these numeric values to the variables. We should not use it like this approach. This is, we can say that static approach or hard coding approach. But a dynamic, that means whenever I'm calling the function, it has to be applied my dynamic values. Each and every time I should not go to the function and edit the function to change the values. Suppose now I define the 10 and 20. Next time, okay, 20, 30. I should not change it in the function. Whenever I'm calling the function, like this, whenever I'm calling the function, I should be able to pass the dynamic value. This is the dynamic approach. Yeah, functions with the parameters of the arguments are functions variables, that is within the functions we will define it, either statically or dynamically, but static is not recommended until if you have the specific reason. But a dynamic approach is recommended. That means take the parameters of the arguments to the function and assign those parameters to these internal variables. Yeah, these variables we can say that inputs. parameters or the arguments or internal function or level, what are the variables you have defined. All these things we can say that inputs. So function, again, it is divided into input variables. And this is one section, and next one is output variables. Output variables are almost the results. Yes, once the complete functionality has been completed, whatever the result that is going to have, that result will store it in the output variables. Yeah, if we're defining the function, identifying that input variables, and that variable, is it a dynamic variable or static variable? On the basis of the static or the dynamic, defining the parameters of the arguments and with internal variables, and then using those internal variables and implementing the business logic. And once a function with variables have been implemented the logic, then identify that what is the result that we want to return back to the client, that is a response. What is the data that we need to return back to the client? The data, we call it into, we store it into that output variables or result variables. But variable, what is that? Which contain the name and value. But two types of the variables, input variables, output variables. Input variables are before going to executing the business logic, what are the inputs that's required? That's we define in the input variables. And once the logic has been implemented, what are the response that is required to the client? That response data, we store it in the output variables, which we return from the function. Is it clear at these points? Understanding the terminologies? This entire process we say the function definition or function implementation. Function definition. Yes, whenever you are planning the function or operation, yes, you need to identify the inputs, whether that is dynamic or static, and then what is the logic that is behind that logic, identifying with the variables, and finally generate the result. The result is the output which will be returned back to the client or program. But function, once it has been defined, how do we invoke the function? Invoke or calling the function. Yeah, suppose here in our example, add function or subtraction or multiplication function, this is the invocation. So if you just talk it to all these points, yeah, once a function has been implemented, how do we use it or how do I call it? Or how do I, yes, invoke that function? Yes, this is invoking the function by passing the arguments and catching the output of this function. Whether do you want to print it or whether do you want to use it this result variable, that is a later story. But this line we can say that invoking the function and catching that output of this function to this variable. Yeah, this is here different values and here different values. Function is the same. And this is another function with the dynamic values. This is another function with the dynamic values. Suppose here another function What is the meaning of this option? What is the meaning of this one? Yes, please.
Variable name, like value of the variable instead of the method.
So this is, we are just invoking the function, but no parameters and no arguments. Simple. This is invoking the function with parameters. This is invoking the function without parameters. That means what is the default A value and B value nowadays? 0, 0. That is the meaning of that. That means who is implementing this function? He has to handle that. If no variables have been defined, or as a Java program point of view, we need to define this another function for it. So what is that function? No parameters. So now this function is defined without parameters. Then what is the first number value? 0. Second number value? 0. Then output always the 0, right? So this is, anyone is passing that A value, B value, then it will be invoked, this function. And if anyone is calling this function, then this will be executed with the default values, that is 0 and 0. Here we have defined the static values, assigning that static values to these variables. But here we have defined these variables dynamically. A and B, whatever the values the user is passing, that's we are going to receiving it, and we are going to assign to this. Are you clear about these points? This is the dynamic variables. And this is static variables. Always the same here. It doesn't change. Anyway, we'll come back to this implementing with the functionality. I mean, that's tomorrow we start about the shell scripting actual. But whenever I talk it that the shell scripting, yes, understand that the points. So variables, whenever I talk it, yes, inputs or arguments are dynamically passing that the values are variables. Our function, yes, that is a set of or block of the statements which are defined to implement the particular activity. Function, whenever we talk it, that is set up the block of the statements. Yes, block of the statements which are defined to perform particular activity. Function definition is one point. This one we say that defining the function with input variables is required like a static or dynamic, and business logic, and finally defining that output variables. Function definition is one point. Function invocation is another point. This is a function calling. Functions will be executed whenever we invoke the function. Suppose if you are calling that the ls-lrth, what is the meaning of that? I'm going to call this function, ls function, by passing these arguments. So I can use it without arguments, ls, or I can use it with arguments, only L or LR or LRT or LRTH. Whatever I need it, I can use it. That means there are all the arguments I'm going to pass it to this ls. But these arguments are the mandatory or optional?
Optional.
Optional. But if I'm going to use a CP, CP is a function that is expecting at least two arguments. What are those two arguments?
Source
File, what
file,
do you want to?
destination file.
Yeah, source file
Source
and
and
destination.
destination.
Destination file. There are the two mandatory arguments you need to pass it. The mean CP function who has implemented who has given that the CP function, he has designed, pass these two arguments at least. But ls function who has designed, if you have those arguments, you pass it. Otherwise, I will use it that default values. This is invoking. We are invoking the functions which are inbuilt functions of the OS. Whenever we install the Linux OS is giving all these functions. The shell, the type of the shell which you are using, it is giving all these functions. There are some functions, mandatory arguments, and optional arguments. Some functions, optional arguments. But this one we say the function invocation. If the function is not defined, suppose environment variables, as we are talking about it, a path environment variable, if you remove it, then this function you cannot locate it. The shell is not able to locate that ls function or cp function. It's throwing that I cannot find it. So whenever you are invoking that, before the invocation, that function must be available. That is, we say the definition. But whenever we are implementing the function with the default values or with the mandatory arguments, where these are all different scopes and variables within the functions and outputs. Outputs is returning the values or printing the values. What you want to print it or what you want to return it. Other program is going to other program is going to use that variable is nothing but returning. Or if you like to print to the console, then use the print option. Here directly I can use the print of that output, or in saying the print echo command, right? We have that echo command to print it. Echo this output variable. I can print to the terminal. Or this output would like to use it another program, I need to return it. We'll talk about all these return statements, exit statements, functions, how to define it. But these concepts are the universal concepts. But tomorrow onwards, we are going to especially applying to the shell scripting. Yeah, how do we define the variables in the shell scripting? How do we read the variables in the shell scripting? How do we pass the arguments to the functions? Or whenever you are invoking the script, how do you pass the arguments to the script? And how to catch that outputs? And another point is here we didn't talk about the conditional based statements. Suppose if I'm going to do that division, especially second number should not be 0, right? So if I'm before going to perform the division, I need to check some conditions. Or before going to perform some additions, the variable a and b value or first number and second number value must be greater than or equal to 0. Or if you give that the negatives, yes, the calculator doesn't support, then you need to handle it. Once you have entered the negative value, please expect it the value is 0 or greater than 0. You need to print a proper message to the user. So that is a condition based statements. How do we define it? Our same block of the statement that is required to execute it number of times. How do we define the iterations? Yes, they're all next we are going to talk it. But just a basic, these are all the terminologies that is required. That before going to start about the shell scripting, that is variables. Already environment variables we are understanding. System level that is defined the variables. About username, about user home directory, about current working directory, PWD variable, path variable, history limit variable, There are the variables already there on the system level. But for about our custom implementation, whenever you are implementing the custom scripts, how do we define the custom variables? That is, we'll talk it tomorrow. Are you clear about these points? If you don't understand these terminologies, let's go ahead and one more time and review and refer that the terminologies. These terminologies are not only just for the shell. So if you're going to learn it about the YAML next during Ansible implementation, Docker files implementation, or Groovy scripting implementation, we use the general terminologies as variables define it, or read the variable, or call the function, or invoke the function, or pass the arguments to the function or to the scripts. But arguments you are passing is nothing but dynamic values we are passing that. We are going to override it. Anyway, all these concepts with the practically we go ahead. So, but just to keep this all these points and review one more time this video. So if you have this the confusion about the terminologies, first time if you're from the computers, I mean non-computers background, definitely these terminologies little bit confusion the initial time, but nothing is impossible. So, but your mindset should not be like that. I'm the non-computers. I cannot go ahead learning about it. No, it is not like that. You can do that. But understanding some terminologies point of view initially, yes, some effort is required. The variable, static variable, dynamic variable, argument, parameters, all these are all same meaning internally, but little bit different. So arguments or parameters, dynamic purpose which we use it. While invoking the function, we'll pass it. But variables inside the function will define it. Assigning the values to the variables. Yes. Assigning the value of this A variable to this variable. Assignment. This one will say that. Returning the values. Yes, once function has been completed its logic and what are the outputs that is required, what is the data that is required returned back to the client, that's we define with the returns. Yeah, that's all from my side for today. Any queries, questions, please let me know before going to wind up for today. And if you have those any pending activities, also try to complete it as much as you can do. And come back to this tomorrow, the reviewing these points, terminologies. These terminologies, always remember it. 2 times or 3 times or the 4 times, if it is required, repeat it. Especially non-computers understanding all these terminologies first time, the very difficult, but nothing possible. Just write it all these terminologies one time on the paper and review 2 or 3 times. Yeah, so that's all from my side for today. I'm going to log off for today. So we'll meet tomorrow and we'll continue. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.